Welcome to Le Weekend, the bonus extended podcast episode for France News Brief. In case you missed one of our dailies, we've put together a convenient way to catch up on the stories from the past week in France, plus additional content about something related to culture, art, history, or current events at the end. If you enjoyed our daily updates, you'll find everything you need right here in a seamless recap of the week's most important headlines. Perfect for those who want to catch up in just one episode, Le Weekend is designed to keep you informed and engaged with a lighter touch at the end. Let's dive in. This is the news for Monday, November 17th. France is targeting Vinted for failure to prevent underage access to adult content. The Child Protection Agency asked the regulator to investigate second-hand clothes marketplace Vinted in another move against e-commerce giants in the country, as reported by Reuters. The upkeep of the nuclear fleet of power utility EDF will cost over 100 million euros by 2035. The Court of Auditors said EDF would need this investment to extend the lifetime of the fleet of 57 nuclear reactors by up to 60 years, as reported by Reuters. Ukraine signed a deal today in Paris to obtain 100 French-made Rafale warplanes over the next 10 years, as Kiev seeks to bolster its defenses against Russia's invasion, as reported by BFM. In the context of the Choose France trade event today in Paris, the Ministry of the Economy announced 9.2 billion euros of new investments by French companies pertaining to entirely new projects in France, as reported by Libération. One of the Louvre Museum's galleries will be closed to the public as a precautionary measure after an audit revealed the particular fragility of some beams in one of the building's wings, as reported by France 24. This is the news for Tuesday, November 18th. A French court rejected today a case against Nestlé's Perrier mineral water brought by a consumer group who demanded the sparkling water be withdrawn from markets. The court said there was not enough evidence of an urgent health risk or a clear violation of the law to justify such a drastic measure, as reported by Reuters. Aviation group Airbus is considering a potentially larger version of its A350 aircraft. According to industry sources, this Airbus project, designated as the A350-2000, was studied at a time when Boeing was working on a possible 777-10X, as reported by Les Echos. Boualem Sansal returned to France after a year-long detention in Algeria. The writer arrived in France today, a week after his release from Algerian prison, in a case that has strained already fragile ties between Paris and Algiers, as reported by Le Monde. France is tightening rules on disruptive passengers on airplanes, with fines of 10,000 euros to 20,000 euros in case of repeat offense, bans on boarding for up to 4 years on a dedicated database. The air sector is moving into high gear to guarantee the serenity of flights, as reported by Le Figaro. Captain Alfred Dreyfus received a posthumous promotion 130 years after the scandal. The former Jewish French army officer, who was wrongfully convicted of espionage amid widespread anti-Semitism in the early 20th century, was promoted to brigadier general as an act of reparation, as reported by Le Monde. This is the news for Wednesday, November 19th. A government spokesperson said that the European Union-Mercosur trade deal still needs work to be acceptable for France. The trade deal negotiated between the European Union and the South American trade bloc is still not acceptable in its current form, as reported by Reuters. The income gap in France is growing as the richest households pull further ahead. France's wealthiest people are typically men in their 50s and 60s, living in Paris as part of a childless couple and working as executives or running their own businesses. This snapshot of the super-rich emerges from a study published by France's National Statistics Institute, ANSEE, which also revealed a dramatic widening on the income gap over the past 20 years, as reported by RFI. Christie's withdrew the world's first calculator from auction. The calculator, developed in 1642 by mathematician Blaise Pascal, which was scheduled for auction today, was suspended after Paris court revoked the export authorization for the item, preventing buyers from taking it abroad, as reported by Le Monde. The city of Nice is planning a controversial ice rink for France's 2030 Winter Olympics. The ice facilities to be built for the Winter Olympic Games would cost nearly 220 million euros, while the rapporteur for the 2026 sports budget said there are more cost-effective solutions available, as reported by Reuters. This is the news for Thursday, November 20th. France is pushing EU sanctions against drug-linked organized crime. France's foreign minister on Thursday proposed the creation of a European Union sanctions regime to tackle cross-border organized drug crime that he said was sweeping across the bloc, as reported by Reuters. Comments by General Fabien Mandon in a speech to local mayors sparked outcry as he faced accusations of warmongering after warning that the country must be ready to lose its children against the background of the threat posed by Russia. The remarks revived a debate over how far France and its European allies should be prepared to go in the conflict, as reported by Le Monde. French authorities charged Platform X over Holocaust denial comments by its AI chatbot Grok. On Monday, Elon Musk's social media AI chatbot posted in French that the gas chambers in Nazi death camps were designed for disinfection against typhus rather than for mass executions, as reported by Le Monde. President Macron has begun a 5-day Africa tour in Mauritius with a push for what he calls win-win partnerships at a moment when France's influence on the continent is waning, as reported by RFI. President Macron has expressed support for the creation of a professional label to distinguish news media outlets from commercial platforms to combat disinformation and fake news and protect against digital interference, as reported by Le Figaro. The Grévin Wax Museum in Paris unveiled its latest figure to join its ranks, Diana, Princess of Wales, in her famous black dress nicknamed the Revenge Dress, as reported by Le Monde. France's National Assembly approved the introduction of a €2 tax, approximately $2.31, targeting small parcels worth less than €150 coming from outside the European Union, which will be used to finance the mechanisms to control these products. If confirmed in the Senate and included in the final budget, the tax is scheduled to take effect on January 1st, 2026, as reported by France 24. This is the news for Friday, November 21st. Berlin and Paris are pushing companies for a fighter jet agreement by mid-December. The governments of Germany and France are piling pressure on industrial leaders to find a solution for the troubled joint fighter jet project, according to sources cited by Reuters. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy will publish a book about his recent time behind bars titled Diary of a Prisoner on December 10th, ahead of his appeal. The publisher is part of the media group controlled by conservative billionaire Vincent Bolloré, as reported by Associated Press. A charity warned that France's most vulnerable households are getting poorer. Families, people grappling with health issues, and many foreign nationals are slipping deeper into poverty in France, according to charity Secours Catholique, which says the profile of those seeking help has changed dramatically over the past 3 decades, as reported by RFI. More than 150 private and public companies signed a charter for mental health at work. The goal of this initiative, a first in France, is to destigmatize mental health in the workplace, train managers and strengthen social dialogue on the subject, and support vulnerable employees by offering concrete and accessible resources, as reported by Le Figaro. A new Bordeaux-Lyon high-speed train line is expected to open around 2027. The news has sparked debate among residents of the Massif Central region, where the historical line passed for several decades, notably via Limoges, as the new line is now planned to bypass this area, as reported by Le Figaro. The late Azzedine Alaïa's Dior collection is on view in Paris. The Galerie Dior is showcasing around 100 pieces from the personal collection of French-Tunisian designer Azzedine Alaïa, a renowned fashion collector. This rare exhibition is richly documented and unprecedented in scope, as reported by Le Monde. You are listening to Le Weekend. And now that you're all caught up with the main headlines from the past week, it's time for our bonus story. Today we're looking at an unusual promotion for a French military officer and why it made the news this week. On November 18th, President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu signed into law a posthumous promotion for a French military officer who died 90 years ago. Captain Alfred Dreyfus is a name synonymous with one of the most dramatic miscarriages of justice in modern French history. In a symbolic act of reparation, the French government finally promoted Dreyfus posthumously to the rank of Brigadier General, 130 years after he was wrongfully accused of treason. The timing is striking. France's National Assembly unanimously approved this promotion in June, followed by Senate backing earlier this month. But why now? Why does a case from 130 years ago still matter enough to require parliamentary action and presidential signature? The answer may lie not just in what happened to Alfred Dreyfus, but in what his case revealed about society, justice, and anti-Semitism. First, we need to travel back to 1894, to a France barely a quarter century removed from the trauma of the Franco-Prussian War. The Third Republic was young and unstable, going from crisis to crisis. President Sadi Carnot had been assassinated just months earlier. Political scandals had rocked the government. Anarchist threats loomed. And into this volatile atmosphere walks a 35-year-old Jewish artillery officer named Alfred Dreyfus, about to become the most famous scapegoat in modern history. Alfred Dreyfus was born on October 9, 1859, in Mulhouse, Alsace, the youngest of 9 children in a prosperous textile manufacturing family. When he was just 9 years old, the Franco-Prussian War erupted and Alsace was annexed by Germany. This childhood experience of displacement shaped his fierce patriotism and his decision to pursue a military career. away to serve the France his family had chosen over remaining in German-occupied territory. By 1889, Dreyfus had risen to the rank of captain. He had graduated from the prestigious École Polytechnique, married, and was building a promising career. He was assigned to the War Ministry, a position of trust and responsibility. By all accounts, he was intelligent, hardworking, and devoted. He was also Jewish, and in the France of 1894, that made him suspect. In September 1894, a French housekeeper named Marie Bastien, who worked at the German embassy, discovered a torn document in a wastebasket. This document, known as the bordereau, listed French military secrets that were apparently being passed to the German military attaché. Someone in the French military was a spy, so the hunt began immediately. The investigation, led by Lieutenant Colonel Jean Sander, head of the Army's counterintelligence section, needed a culprit quickly. Suspicion fell on Dreyfus for reasons that had nothing to do with evidence. He was Jewish. He came from Alsace, which was now German territory. He had access to the information mentioned in the bordereau. Most damningly, in the eyes of his accuser, he was Jewish. The anti-Semitic press and military officials saw in Dreyfus the perfect scapegoat, proof that Jews could never be truly French, that they were inherently disloyal. In October 1894, Dreyfus was arrested. The case against him was built on a handwriting comparison that experts would later dispute, on secret files that his defense lawyers were never allowed to see, and on prejudice masquerading as patriotism. On December 22nd, he was convicted of treason in a court-martial and sentenced to life imprisonment. On January 5th, Dreyfus endured one of the most humiliating rituals in French military tradition. In the courtyard of the École Militaire, before silent ranks of soldiers and a jeering crowd behind railings, he was formally cashiered. Officers cut the rank insignia, buttons, and braid from his uniform. They broke his sword, and through it all, Dreyfus shouted what would become his eternal refrain: "I swear that I am innocent. I remain worthy of serving in the army. Long live France, long live the army." On April 13, Dreyfus was shipped to Devil's Island, a former leper colony off the coast of French Guiana. There he was imprisoned in a small stone hut surrounded by a high wall. He was kept in solitary confinement, shackled for prolonged periods, his food served in rusty cans, his only companions the vermin and scorpions that infested his cell. For 1,517 days, that's over 4 years, Alfred Dreyfus endured conditions designed to break him. When false rumors of his escape circulated in September 1896, authorities subjected him to even worse treatment. For 6 weeks, he was shackled to his bed each night with double buckles, unable to move. A wooden fence was erected around his exercise area, blocking his view of even the island or the sea. His captors did everything possible to ensure he would die there, forgotten and disgraced. But Dreyfus survived. He followed every regulation, no matter how absurd or demeaning, as his own form of resistance. He maintained his dignity and his insistence on innocence. He lived for the letters from his wife Lucie and his brother Mathieu, who never stopped fighting for him. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in Paris, the truth was beginning to emerge. In 1896, Lieutenant Colonel Georges Picquart, the new head of military intelligence, stumbled upon evidence that would change everything. Another document had been intercepted from the German embassy, a note that became known as the Petit Bleu. When Picquart examined it, he recognized the handwriting. It belonged to Major Ferdinand Wolfson Esterhazy, a French officer with a reputation for gambling debts and dubious character. Picard did what any honest officer would do. He compared Esterhazy's handwriting to the original bordereau that had convicted Dreyfus. They matched. The real traitor had been found. Dreyfus was innocent. But when Picard presented his evidence to his superiors, he discovered something far more sinister than a single act of espionage. The military leadership knew Dreyfus was innocent, or at least knew the case against him was fatally flawed, but they couldn't admit it. To exonerate Dreyfus would mean admitting the French military had been wrong, that it had convicted an innocent man based on prejudice and forged documents. It would mean losing face. It was unacceptable. Rather than free Dreyfus, the military doubled down. Picard was transferred to Tunisia, sent on dangerous assignments made to silence him or get him killed. Major Hubert Joseph Henry, who worked in intelligence, began forging additional documents to strengthen the case against Dreyfus. When Esterhazy was finally brought to trial in January 1898, the military court acquitted him after just 2 days. Picard, the whistleblower who had tried to reveal the truth, was imprisoned for a year. But in January 1898, everything would change. The power of the word, mightier than the sword. The newspaper L'Aurore published an open letter that would become one of the most famous pieces of journalism in history. Written by the celebrated novelist Émile Zola, it bore the headline, J'accuse, I accuse. In his searing prose, Zola accused the military leadership by name of conspiracy, of knowingly convicting an innocent man of forgery and cover-up. He accused them of anti-Semitism. He demanded justice. Zola had measured the consequences. He was tried for libel, convicted, and sentenced to a year in prison and a heavy fine. He fled to England to continue the fight. However, Zola's letter had lit a fire. France was now divided into two camps. The Dreyfusards, who demanded justice for Dreyfus and saw the case as a battle between truth and institutional corruption, between republican values and military authoritarianism, and the anti-Dreyfusard nationalists and anti-Semites who insisted Dreyfus was guilty and that questioning the military was tantamount to treason. The division was bitter, families split, riots erupted. The press became a battleground. Intellectuals like Anatole France and Marcel Proust signed petitions. Over 3,000 people added their names to the cause. By August 1898, the House of Cards started to collapse. Major Henry, the forger, confessed to fabricating evidence. Unable to live with his crimes, he committed suicide. Esterhazy, panicking, fled to Belgium and then London. The case for a new trial was becoming solid. In June, after 4 years, 2 months, and 26 days on Devil's Island, Alfred Dreyfus left his prison. He was returning to France for a second trial, so the agony was not yet over. The retrial took place between August and September. The military court found Dreyfus guilty again, though this time with extenuating circumstances, and sentenced him to 10 years in prison. It was a compromise verdict, a way to save face. But public pressure mounted. President Émile Loubet pardoned Dreyfus in September 1899, citing his poor health. But it wasn't an act of justice, it was mercy. Dreyfus was free, but his name had not been cleared. For 7 more years, Dreyfus fought for his innocence. Finally, in 1906, the High Court of Appeal overturned all previous convictions. The court declared Dreyfus absolutely innocent. He was reinstated in the military with the rank of major and decorated with the Legion of Honor. His ordeal had taken 12 years. Alfred Dreyfus went on to serve in World War I, commanding an artillery supply column and performing front-line duties at Verdun and on the Chemin des Dames. He was promoted to lieutenant colonel. His son Pierre served throughout the war as an artillery officer, earning the Croix de Guerre. In 1918, Dreyfus was made an officer of the Legion of Honor. He died in Paris in 1935 at the age of 75, exactly 29 years after his exoneration. His funeral passed through the Place de la Concorde through ranks of troops assembled for Bastille Day. He was buried in the Cimetière de Montparnasse, where he rests to this day. But even in vindication, Dreyfus disappointed those who had championed him because they expected him to be angry, a crusader for justice. Instead, he sought privacy and quiet. In his autobiography, he revealed little of his inner life, preferring to quote from letters rather than his emotions. He maintained his dignity in silence. His proponents had made him a symbol, and symbols are not supposed to be ordinary men who want to go home to their families. Perhaps that was the point. Alfred Dreyfus never wanted to be a cause célèbre. As he told a friend, "I was only an artillery officer whom a tragic mistake prevented from pursuing his career." The Dreyfus affair left an indelible mark on France as it exposed the deep veins of anti-Semitism running through society and institutions. And now, 130 years later, France has posthumously promoted Alfred Dreyfus to Brigadier General, the rank many believe he would have achieved had his career not been destroyed by anti-Semitism. President Macron also declared July 12th, the anniversary of Dreyfus's exoneration, an annual day of national commemoration. Why does this matter in 2025? Because anti-Semitism has not disappeared. It's just wearing new faces. It took 130 years, but the French Republic has finally said unequivocally, Brigadier General Alfred Dreyfus, you were right all along. You were innocent. The Dreyfus affair reminds us that the fight for justice is never truly over, and vigilance against prejudice must be constant. Thank you for listening to Le Weekend, your one-stop destination for everything we covered this past week in France. Catch our daily France News Brief roundups of the main news in France every weekday, wherever you get your podcasts. Stay informed.